Yeah, I get it.
Awesome. All right, all. Thanks for joining us. So I am recording this because I will post it on the RSR YouTube channel for people who don't get to see it live, but we've got a handful of folks on here that I recognize and some that I don't, so welcome. I am Coach Holly. I am the head coach of RSR, Ready, Set, Row, and the RSR Elite Summer Racing Team. That Alyse was so awesome and came and was a junior coach this summer. And I also have Coach Kate on here. She is muted and driving, but she's here if anyone has questions because she works actually at West Point. And so I'm gonna let Alyse tell you guys a little bit of her background, but really quickly, I am really thrilled she's here to talk to you guys. She was an incredible, impactful participant in the camp last summer. And the first time we had a junior coach actually. And it was Kate's idea. And I'm so grateful that she had it. Alyse had been rowing with Kate when she was a cadet at West Point. And as all of you know, with the pandemic, lost most of the last 2 years of her seasons there. And so Kate had this great idea of bring her and she can be a junior coach. We might be able to get Talons in here to have her come back and be a rowing coach at a later point after she has finished her commitment. And she did a great job leading our strength, a lot of other leadership roles at the camp. And then also we threw in her boat a lot. So that was really fun. And she was a core member of the engine room of our women's 8 that went on to win the gold medal at Summer Nationals last summer, which is the first time we'd ever done that, which was amazing. And I know the athletes really just loved having her there. So Alyse, thank you so much for doing this. It's so awesome to have you here. And we're really excited to hear your thoughts and give all your tidbits and advice to the folks on here about leadership and, you know, what you can advise them to do as they're now 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds from your experience, what else they can be doing. So can you tell these guys a little bit about your background and your experience at West Point and let them get to know you?
Yeah, so thank you, Holly, again for asking me to come on. Like, I really love this program and everything that it stands for. It's all about, and I really do appreciate it. So, so like Holly said, my name is Alyse Rawls. I'm a second lieutenant in the United States Army as a transportation officer. I went to, like she said, I went to United States Military Academy and I got my bachelor's in science and sociology. I was on the crew team for about 3.5 years. I started my plebe year or my freshman year at West Point, and I actually didn't really know a whole lot about crew. I was just told that since I was tall and I was strong, I should give it a try. And that give it a try ended up me being on the team, me winning nationals that same that same spring with my teammates in the 8+ boat, my novice year. And then I also was a two-time All-American my sophomore year and then my senior year at United States Military Academy. So currently I'm at Fort Hood, Texas, and I work for the first air cab unit, which I'm sure doesn't really mean much to y'all, but yes, I'm working with airplanes basically. So like I said, I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. So you guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat for me. I will try to organize them. I have a bunch of things that Alyse and I have already discussed about talking about, but if you guys have specific questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat and I will organize them and we'll try to reserve, 10 or 15 minutes at the end. So Alyse, tell these guys a little bit more about what it's like being at West Point, especially being a woman of color. I know we talked about showing some photos and I think that's really, really powerful. So, how did you decide to get there? Then what was it like? I'm adding Becky Moore just asked me, how did you decide to apply to West Point? So perfect timing, Becky. Let's talk about that now. And then what was it like there? And then specifically, what was it like for you?
Yeah, so my sister, she's actually in the chat. And me and my sister, we decided that we wanted to go to West Point after being pushed by a teacher that taught at my high school. And he said that we'd both be like perfect candidates and like we could probably like get in. And we were like, I don't know about the military. It just didn't really like sound like us at the time. But eventually we were like, okay, so if you do it, then I'll do it. And we both went through the process of applying together. And after like the West Point application process is pretty like, it's pretty extensive. So we were both like, okay, so since that we were applying and like we're putting our all into it, if we get in, we might as well go. And we ended up getting in. And that was pretty much it. We didn't really think about the Army. It was mostly like West Point at the time, but eventually West Point inculcated values that, you know, we want to be in the Army for our soldiers. So my my experience at West Point, it's honestly really like hard to explain because it's such like a unique experience that once you like know that somebody is a West Pointer, it's like the conversation starts clicking and like it could be at least for an hour or so. But overall, I'd say that my West Point experience was pretty much life-changing. It gave me so many like great opportunities. It allowed me to meet so many great people, including like Coach Kate and RSR and things like that. But it gave me some of the happiest moments of my life and some of like the saddest moments of my life. It pushed like the challenges there are just unmatchable. I really thought that like I was, all my buttons were pushed in high school, but I realized like it wasn't even like close enough to like the buttons like that need to be pushed in order for me to be the person and leader that I am today. So but as a woman of color at West Point, it is a different challenge. Just being a woman period at West Point too is a very different challenge because I'm gonna pull up this PowerPoint slide to show you how the makeup of West Point's demographics. So. All right. So hopefully everyone can see this, but as you can see on the screen that West Point, it is 77% male population, at least in 2019, and the female population is 23%. So 1 in 4 people, they're only women, and then the other 3/4 are going to be male. So that's definitely a challenge because obviously like people gravitate towards people that look like you, and of course like girls, they need like support from other girls in order to get through college in general, but West Point also. So that was a challenge within itself because there was only so many people, so many females that you could talk to at the time, but also to put race into the aspect, on the chart that there was only 435 the screen's in the way, but there was about like 400 or so African Americans, about, I believe, about 400 or so Hispanics, Asians only like 300, and so on and so forth. And to break that down, that includes the entire school. So imagine those numbers when it comes to women. So in my class specifically, there were only 40 Black females within my class. And then for Hispanics, I know there were only about 5 or so. And for Asian women, I believe it was only about, this is coming from people I've talked to throughout the school, not specific facts, but like that's the estimate. So it's pretty tough because like I said, gravitating towards people that you really want to know or that really looks like you, it helps a lot with that support. And when you don't have that support, you have to really push yourself outside your comfort zones or outside of people that you would normally talk to in order to feel a little bit more comforted and less lonely. Because that's something I had to deal with, which is not really a challenge that other people may have had to deal with. But there are also good things. And this is another chart, but I love this picture, and I showed this to the woman at RSR during this presentation. This is actually the picture that me and my sister, we had on like the background of our phone screens and our iPads, because like it is so inspiring. That was the class of 2016. I believe there's only about 20 women and less than 20 women in that photo. And they were proud enough to say, hey, like I'm a Black woman from West Point, and you should be proud of it because it was something that was hard. And I didn't show the rest of these photos because I didn't realize like how impactful this photo was going to be. So I want to show you the progression of like how many women there are today at West Point. So to go on, this is the class of 2019. As you can see, there's about like 30 of them, which is like a lot better than it was 2016. But 2020, as you can see, it grew even more, which is also very powerful. And then for my class, which is pretty crazy, that's a lot of people. And like, it wasn't just Black women that just grew in size as well, but also grew with Hispanics, Asians, and so on and so forth. So that's something that I'm very proud of, like my school to recognize as very important, because there are soldiers that need leadership to look like them. So I'm very proud of them. Yeah, to answer that question.
So awesome. So Alyse, tell these guys a little bit, and just to give you guys a background, Alyse did an amazing presentation for RSR. I try to have all of the coaches demonstrate vulnerability, right, and bravery by sharing some of their stories. And Alyse's was so unique that we actually asked her to show some pictures, and she actually did a really great presentation. So that's what she's referencing. So tell these guys a little bit about, what is leadership at West Point? Specifically, what were like mental skills you were training, at West Point, so that then we can talk a little bit about like, then how are you able to drill down over the summer with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So leadership at West Point, that is literally like the reason why people go there. It is like the best school in the world, I believe, in what's been told to me, of where if you want to be a leader, you go there. If you want to be a great leader, you definitely go there. So and it's something that like I feel so like blessed in, to be trained on, and something that I felt like I wanted to share to like the girls at the camp. But I'm sorry, what was the second question, Javi?
And then, so what were the mental skills? Like, how did they train that? Like, what were the classes actually like at West Point? And then how did you?
So the classes like at West Point, everything, literally every class, every training event, every military event, physical, academically, it had to do something with leadership. That was the main focal point, was just leadership. Whether that was like passing a PT test, it was because, if you don't pass a PT test, then how can you lead soldiers into PT? Or if you can't understand like a basic concept in like this Psych 101 class, then like how can you really truly understand soldiers? So things like that. But specifically for cadets who had a harder time with like the mental barriers of like the challenges that West Point presented, there was a program called the Center of Enhanced Performance. And you can volunteer yourself to go there if you needed like extra help on like mental work. So for example, I struggled in this class called Survival Swim. And I would go there because I needed to jump off a 6-meter tower into the water. And it was really scary. One of the hardest things I had to do, even though it's like a 3-second event. However, I had to go through, there are some mental skills included like acceptance, like, like fear management and things like that in order for me to get there. But I only ever applied it to like just that class specifically and not really any other classes, because at West Point, there was a harder time to like self-reflect because of a lot of the things that you had to do, like had to be done like in a very quick and like thoughtless motion. It was just like you had to get it done no matter what. And because of that, there was never like a why behind the things that you did. And that's something I realized that I didn't really like self-reflect upon and like appreciate, because like that's where like your values, that's like where your values come from and like what your leadership philosophy is. And granted, they did talk about that stuff, but like I said, you were so busy, you didn't really appreciate it enough. And so I think that during RSR, during my month at RSR, I really got to get down to the nitty gritty and like really like have a moment of self-reflection, because I had a whole month rather than just a class for an hour. And then I had to go back to my room. I had to go to practice. So.
Yeah, so when we had talked about this before, I was thinking to myself, almost like you studied it like academically at West
Mhm.
Point, um, which is great still, right? But it's like you're studying it from a book, or maybe there are some exercises without the opportunity for you to practice and then reflect and practice and modify and reflect and practice, which is sort of what we do at
Mhm.
RSR. So
Mhm.
you think that's fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was telling you this earlier that um, at school, there's only so much that you can like study and not do. So for example, like some of the books that we read, they would say don't do this as a leader, but we couldn't really apply it because there was no time to apply it. We couldn't be in that same environment. And
Mm.
I think at RSR, what we did a lot was like we studied it, we talked about it, we wrote it in journals. We had the time and like just like the time to actually do that. And once we actually studied it and we talked about it, we wrote about it, we reflected upon it, we were basically given like practical exercise on the water in order to execute it. Because that's like the most important part is like the practice of it. So, mhm.
What's an example of, and we didn't talk about this before, so sorry to put you on the spot, but
That's
now I'm
okay.
curious. What's an example of something that they would have taught you in an academic setting, but then you wouldn't have been able to practice?
I would say like the leadership books that we had to read and we studied. For example, there's this class called Military Officer Ethics, and we read a lot of books like Black Hearts. I don't know if you guys have read it. It's a pretty intense book, and it's about soldiers out on deployment and some of like the um, was it the bad decisions that they made. And our teachers would tell us like, hey, don't do this when you're out there. Don't like take this with you and like use it like out in the force. And it's like it's great like that we're learning this and like we keep this back in our mind, but like the practice is where it really counts.
Yeah. Yeah, so the one thing we talked about this summer, and with Elise there, was just even more relevant is, I mean, rowing is so low risk, you guys.
Yeah.
Like, you're just moving a boat back and forth. Like, nothing's gonna, if you try something new or you're on the erg, if you try something new and you really go for it and you miss the mark, like, what's gonna happen? Nothing, you know?
Right.
And so I try to remind everyone, like, this is not, um, nothing will happen,
Right.
right? And the great thing about the summer is if you don't want to see me ever again, you don't have to. So it's not
Right.
even like I'm the regular year-round coach that's making selection decisions. Like, I get that bit, right? Of like not wanting to try something and then have like a tarnished mark on how that coach perceives you or something. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
never see these people again if you don't want to. So
Right.
that's really interesting. So talk a little bit to these guys about, what you think maybe your high school experiences would have been like if you had done RSR as like a 16-year-old.
Yeah, so this is something I just recently had talked about my sister with. And it's something it's like because she was a D1 basketball player at West Point, and she walked onto the team, and like that's something like extremely brave for her to do because they take a lot of recruits. And so we used to joke about like, hey, like if I had the confidence like in high school, then like I definitely would have like been better than you at basketball because basketball is like our first love. And like and reflecting back on like when I was younger, my mom, she was a D1 basketball player who was recruited by Tennessee and Duke, and ended up going to Virginia Tech. And my dad, who was a wrestler at Michigan, he wrestled there, was an All-American, was a Big Ten champ, all those like good things. And growing up, I was younger. I used to tell my dad like, "Hey, I want to win like championships. I want to like, do really big things like specifically for like my school and like my high school." And he said, well, you have like, you have all like the gifts and like the talents, like, and you just have to like work hard. And I was like, well, that's easy enough. So me and my sister, we would go, was it extra reps, like after practice, like foul shots, like every single day, like dribbling, like anytime like we would go somewhere, we have a tennis ball to like get our hands stronger, like things like that. But it was something like, it wasn't until like my junior year in high school when I realized like I worked this hard. I have all these physical abilities, I have this talent, genetics, things like that, but something just is not clicking with me. And it was the mental aspect. And at that point in my life, like I didn't believe like the mental aspect of like basketball was just as important as like the physical aspect. But it it was literally what caused me to step away from basketball for good because I couldn't find that confidence and I couldn't overcome that hurdle because I wasn't taught the skills. I didn't know like how to like overcome it. I was just told like, just keep working hard or like, don't think about it, just do it. And like that's easier said than done for a 15 or 16-year-old. And I love like all the coaches and like my parents for everything they did, but I didn't know the skills that that RSR really like teaches because like if like I said from before, if I had those skills, if I had that time to self-reflect and really get down to nitty gritty of like what was holding me back and like what I was so afraid of, I I think I would have stayed with basketball like for a lot longer. So it's like I don't get sad about it. I really don't because like I'm everything happens for a reason and I can't go back in time anyway. So what's the point of being sad now? But I'm just glad like there's a program out there that can teach girls to be like the best that they can be with because and like teaching them that physical and mental is one and the same. So
Yes.
yeah.
What do you, now that you have some distance, and we also didn't talk about this, you guys, so I'm putting Alyse on the spot again. What do you think you were afraid of back then? Like, why not walk? And I don't know your sister at all, so I definitely can't put her on the spot, but I'm tempted to be like, Jessica, tell us what you think Alyse was scared of, because I see her name on the thing. But what do you think? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm thinking about my experience too, right? And I was recruited to row at Harvard, but I played soccer in high school at a pretty decent level. And I was this tempted to being like, I'm just going to try out for the soccer team. And then, and all the rowers were like, you cannot do that. Like, you were recruited to row. That is like a big faux pas. And I was like, I'll just do both. You guys will be fine. And I didn't.
Man. Yeah.
Frankly, because I was worried that I wouldn't make it, and then I'd have caused all this hullabaloo, for no reason. But do you remember it all? Like, what were you scared of to have not tried to walk onto the basketball team at West Point?
Yeah. So it's like something that actually holds me back to this day. It's what is it? Being courageous enough to take like that step, like being courageous enough to fail and like seeing like what is gonna be. Like I know Coach Kate, she used to tell me all the time, like just like be curious, like what's the worst that can happen? Like if you can push harder on the earth or like what, let's see like how hard you can go. Like I just when I was younger, I just never wanted to take that risk. Like specifically when I was playing basketball, I was second guessed all the time, even though I knew like I worked so hard to like get this opportunity. I just would never take it because I didn't want to fail or because I would mess up. Because I'm a perfectionist, 100%. I'm sure a lot of girls can like relate to this. I'm a perfectionist 100%. If I know it's not going to work, sometimes I hold myself back and say like, hey, like let's not do it. But I know that's like not the right thing to do. And like I said, I'm still working on it.
We're all still working on it, Alyse, by the way.
Right. Right. That's comforting.
You are. Everyone is, right? Like
right.
we will, particularly women, even the Brave data will show you, like for the rest of our lives, none of us will hit the bravery score that middle school girls will report for the rest of our lives.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. I'll tell you the data at the end if you really want to know.
Okay.
But keep going. I can relate to this too, right? I didn't want to play sports that I wasn't going to win. So I just didn't play those.
Right, exactly. And like if honestly, I think I didn't try out for the team because like I knew like at that point basketball was over for me and I needed to move on to something new, especially since I wanted my sister to kind of go on her own journey and myself to go on a different journey. And I'm cool that it worked out. So yeah.
Were you able to see the minds? So you were in this unique junior coach role, right? Where you were in a leadership position at RSR, but then we still put you on the erg with all the athletes. And we're like, guess what? You're not retired yet. We're going to still race you. So did you see the mindset shift for them as they started to like both view either their performance or the risk, or what's the worst that's going to happen, like you're saying, Kate, we're saying, what did you see from your point of view?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I really did see like, I'd say more so like a shift in attitude and a shift in confidence. So um I don't think it was like so much performance, but like I said, attitude and confidence. So for example, like at that last erg test that the girls had to take, some of them they didn't feel like they like did good like at all, but perfectionism. But I I was talking to some of them, and some of the girls were like, "Hey, like, I'm just glad like I'm not reacting as bad to this erg story like I used to, because now I feel like I know something was holding me back and I can like overcome it, or like I know like this performance is not make me who I am." And it's that was something that was really exciting to see, especially at that age. Like that is so important. It's very important. So that was from my perspective.
Yeah. If you guys haven't listened to it, I did an Instagram live, and I recorded it in the Instagram feed, with Julia Veith, who's a freshman at Stanford, who stroked the Cox Junior Worlds for the US this past summer in 2021, that won. And she rode with us for 2 summers. And in 2019, she did not hit the target 2K we had for her. And we took, Alyse is referring to the last 2K. We do it after selection is done, right? By design, so that people don't put too much pressure on it. I'm like, I don't actually care what your 2K time is. I've already selected the lineups. And so she didn't hit the time that she wanted, but I remember watching her face as she got off of it, and she was like, "Oh my God, I just learned so much." And I was so happy for her, because so often you see like people aren't able to see all the development or the change or the lessons that they're seeing, because all they're looking at this is time, and it's just binary, like you either hit it or you didn't hit it. And she said that was like the best 2K she'd ever had in terms of the mental game. And when I asked her in that feed, I asked her to talk about it, she said it was because she found herself like going down the rabbit hole of, I'm not going to hit the time. Like I'm on the path, the old path, the habitual path. And she was able to revert herself and like sort of refocus back on. And she might've been a split or 2 off, but she never came way off. Anyway, she felt like she won the mental game in the 2K, even though the time wasn't, she might not have won the race, but she won the mental game in that piece. And that's what, at least I think you're referring to, is like them to start seeing like there's all this other stuff that happens rather than just the time that comes out at the end, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell these guys a little bit about some of like the most challenging, either physically or mentally, things. You talked about the high board at West Point. What skills would you have used now that you've been digging a little deeper to manage those, if you could go back in time?
Yeah. So one, I have a list actually. So I would say I have my most physically challenging thing that happened at West Point, and then my most, I'd say academically, military, physically challenging thing at West Point. So I'd say my most physically challenging thing is actually, let me see, this badge that I earned right here. Oh man, I really earned this badge. So it's called the Norwegian Foot March, and at West Point they're known for like the hills and like the dips, and like it's the elevation is absolutely crazy, and it's a 19-mile ruck march with 35 pounds on your back, and you have to, and under, I believe it's 5 hours for women, you have to what is it? And under 5 hours for a woman, you have to complete that that ruck march, and so during that time, you have to do between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., by the way. And during that day, I actually took an Army combat fitness test, which is just like our PT test that same day. It's just like 6 events. It's super tough too. And so
you're tired going into it.
Very tired. Also dehydrated. I was also very sleepy because like I was busy during like the week because I had like a couple of tests and like club activities and practice as well. So it was, and like in the middle, I think it was mile 3. I was thinking to myself, I was like, I really don't think like I'm going to be able to make this because of like all those factors that were adding up. And like, I was by myself at that point. And luckily, I actually found someone like a girl that was doing it with me because she was also struggling. We were like, oh, well, you just want to help each other out. We stayed together for the rest of the 16 miles. And I think, I think it was like before I did the Norwegian foot march, it was, I before I was telling myself, oh, it's gonna be fine, like I'm gonna crush it, like it's gonna be great, and like all these unrealistic things that I knew were going through my head, and I actually kind of amped my anxiety up a little bit more than anticipated. But I think if I use the mental skill of like acceptance, like this is going to be hard, and like you're okay with it because you have done harder things, then it would have been a little bit better. And the same thing with air assault school, which was just this trophy. If I had, I think.
What is that? Wait, tell us what that is.
Air assault school. So it's just basically a military school that you learn, and at the end of it, you rappel a helicopter in order to simulate what you could for military operations. And that one was pretty hard, but I got through because I didn't think about like how hard it may have been, like specifically the rappelling up the airplane, because remember I'm afraid of heights because the 6-meter swim tower. I think I could have used that mental skill as well.
Yeah, so the one she's referencing is well, we talk about a bunch of coping mechanisms. So one that Alyse seems to really like is the acceptance model, which is, I try to explain to people all the time. A lot of folks will be like, everyone tells me I'm so negative, but I can't be positive, Holly. And I'm like, you don't have to be positive, right? No one actually wants to sit down and do 5x2K where someone's like, yeah. Like that's not the goal. And I actually like slap you if I was doing 5x2K and that was next to me. I'd be like, that is not helping me, right? But I would want to have someone sit down and be like, oh, Alyse, this is going to be rough, but I'm here with you, and like fist pump it, right? Yeah. Where like you recognize it's going to be hard and you're committed to doing it anyway, as opposed to like pretending like it's going to be fine. Because then when it's not fine, then you're like, something is wrong with me because it's not fine.
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So, go
ahead.
Oh, my other most challenging event was being, it's called basic training squad leader for at West Point. And this was mentally challenging because it was, first of all, I had the monkey on my back knowing that it was going to be the highest grade within my GPA at West Point. And, you know, leadership, it's a leadership detail. So of course, like I said, leadership is a pretty big part of the program. And like, that was the only thing that could prove like really whether or not like you were kind of ready to like go into the Army, basically. And I had a lot of challenges only because I wasn't like an expert on like my military and soldiering tasks and drills like I should have been compared to the leadership that I worked with. But the leadership that I also worked with, I was the only female within my leadership, and I was also the only person of color. And oh, by the way, they're all friends with each other, and it's peer graded.
It's peer grading? You didn't tell me that part before.
Yeah, it is peer graded. And they all went combat arms. I'm not combat arms, I'm support. And combat arms is a whole different culture that something that I knew I wasn't going to be a part of because I knew what I wanted to do. But at the end of it, I got a C for my leadership detail, which is pretty bad for a West Point cadet. Like that's almost below average, at least to my standards. And at the time, that I didn't really recognize that I was taking the C so personally. And I think I took it personally because I was told during my grading that the leadership style that my peers and like also the other people who were in charge of me, they said that wasn't the style that they were looking for. And it didn't really match the flow, what basic training really was. And so for me to get that C based on like my leadership style, I took it personally. And I really thought that my performance at that time wasn't what was exactly like who I was. And that for a while, for a couple of months, it really hurt me. And I actually had to go to counseling for it because at that point, I didn't know if I belonged like at the United States Military Academy or not, if I couldn't even lead like 6 or 7 kids into West Point. So, but I eventually learned and overcame before RSR that, my performance isn't like who I am. Like I was going to make mistakes. I was only 20 years old at the time. I'm not supposed to be an expert in leading people just yet. So that was a mental challenge, but something that I knew I needed to go through in order to be the person I am today. So.
Yeah. So the skill that I think maybe Alyse got to drill down a little more, and as she's just reflecting on the story maybe this summer, although you surmounted it at West Point, which is so amazing, is this concept that we remind everyone that performer does not equal performance. So you're separate. And we saw that with the coaches, this summer. We had these 2 amazing Olympic coaches who I'm talking about this, and they had retired within the year after like a decade of training, and sometimes getting almost like teary-eyed about it, of like, I've spent like 10 years of my life thinking like my value or the biggest value or one of my biggest values is connected to like whether I bring a gold medal home for the United States. So anyway, I had the other questions I had for you are more about what you're doing now, but let me look at some of these questions that came in. So talk a little bit about, I think Becky's asking about like how the role of the rowing team fits in with like the PT training required at West Point. Is that fair, Becky?
Ooh.
Like,
no, that's a fair question. So at West Point, I laugh at this motto because some people aren't this, but they say that every cadet is an athlete, and I'm sure my sister's laughing at this right now. But so every day, usually, or every other day, cadets are expected to be a part of a competitive sport and represent their company within that sport. So it's either you go against other companies, or you go on a club team, you go against other club teams with that sport, or you're a D1 athlete, you go against other teams within that conference. And so the crew team, and they count that as like a physical, like as our PT, because like it's not only supposed to be physically developing, but it's also like supposed to develop our leadership skills as well. So it's not like we wake up at 5 a.m. every day, like doing PT, unless like you need the PT, like remedial PT for those who aren't passing like height and weight or PT standards. So every day I did crew because I was required to, and that's the sport that I chose. So, yeah. And
it counted for the PT. You didn't have to like do the daily stuff. You just had to do the tests or whatever.
Yeah, I just had to do the test.
Okay. So
Holly, can I just ask?
Yeah.
So Alyse, it's wonderful to hear you, and thank you so much for being here. I'm learning 100% more about West Point than I've ever known. So this is really good. I think what I was asking was, or I was trying to think through, is how much, because crew is, as we all know, there's one voice that gets to talk in the boat, the coxswain, and then there's everybody who has to feel their sense of need to depend on each other, but also their equal importance. At least that's one of the ways that I would try and get people to talk about it. And I wondered, how much is that really the way and maybe I'm not using the right word, but a group of soldiers works? Is it closer to a crew, or are there really some other kinds of rules that come in? Like, no, we're not all the same. we need to understand that, or we
Mm.
don't all have a voice. One person has, like, where is there an overlap with the military cohesion, and where are there differences if you saw them? That's what I was interested in.
Yeah, sorry, I did not
Okay.
answer that.
It's okay. I didn't ask the
correctly.
question well. I'm just fleshing it out here.
That's a great question because we every day, like soldiers, cadets, officers, we're always told all the time, like, everyone is a soldier at the end of the day. If you don't know how to do a specific job that you're supposed to be an expert in, then you are failing. So I know that the coxswain isn't supposed to like be in the boat, like, as a rower. However, they should be familiar with like some like techniques mentally or like physically in order to like get the boat going. And so that's how I would compare it. But at the same time, like there are, very specific structures in order to distinguish between like the leadership and those who do the actual jobs. And I don't see that much in rowing, but that's definitely in the military in order to get stuff done and be efficient. So I hope that answers your question.
I can add on and embarrass Alyse a little bit about this, Becky, I think, and answer your question some. I distinctly remember having a conversation where, I'm going to embarrass you a little, Alyse, but it was so awesome.
Okay.
She said to me, I think there's more from this one particular athlete. Like, I know this athlete has more,
Mm.
and I'm not seeing it. And she was in the boat with her one day, like at practice or something. And we talked about like Alyse's role or opportunity or almost obligation to communicate to her, I need some more from you. Like, I'm out here on the battlefield and you're behind me or whatever, right? Like, you're not fully there. And that's a really tricky thing in our sport. And I think actually the best crews, at least at the collegiate level, this happens among the athletes, actually, the accountability of effort alongside the support of that effort and the vulnerability of that effort is happening. And the fastest teams, I'd even remembered, I'm forgetting his name, but there was a coach at Duke who had just come from Ohio State years ago that had started when, they overhauled the whole Duke coaching staff. And I went and watched an erg practice and I asked him, because he'd just come from Ohio State when Ohio State had won like 3 national championships in a row or whatever insane thing they'd done. And I said, what's the one thing you remember seeing at Ohio State when you guys were like winning all that? And he said, or I said, what would you tell these athletes that they need to do to look more like Ohio State? Because Duke, was all, they were like, wow, they've got all these new coaches and they hadn't made NCAAs. And he said, I would tell them they need to race each other. And I said, tell me more about that. And he said, at Ohio State, the coaches don't need to tell you that. He was like, that happens in the locker room if someone's not racing each other. And I was like, okay. So, like that level of sort of accountability that like, that's your job. And I try to communicate this to the athletes over the summer in a slightly toned down junior level, right? Because it's a little terrifying maybe to go full on and they're totally not ready for it. So you're just nudging them outside their comfort zones toward this space. But there's a really great quote I use, and I can email it to you, Becky. It's a surfing quote that talks about the best surfers are waiting on their surfboard for the big wave. They're not paddling for an easy wave so they can like show everyone that they can stand up and ride the easy wave. They're actively waiting for the big wave to see if they can do it, right? Like the biggest one that's the hardest for them to do is what they're waiting to do, as opposed to like someone taking the easier way out or an erg time that they know they can hit, or, like there's all, you can extrapolate that in so many ways for our sports. It's really great analogy where you want to be the surfer in order to have your best performance and keep improving and keep growing and all those things. And tangentially, to be the best teammate, you have to be the surfer, because for you to keep pursuing that level of effort means you're pulling everyone else along and they need you to push them to go faster. Like there's a synergy there, and the cohesion you're talking about, I think, happens when people risk and are that vulnerable. I don't even care if they hit it. I just want the kid that's going to go for it and fight through. And if they don't hit it, all the better. Then I know they really went for it because they couldn't hit it, So all of those things. And I have a couple, Elise would probably chuckle when I said them, but I would, there's a couple workouts where I like make it clear, like we don't leave anyone here at RSR. So like if someone's still erging, you're erging, like that type of environment. But it was just so interesting because I remember you picking up on that, Elise, and I was like, you should tell her. Like that is, and that is courageous communication. We talk about that, right? Because that is not intuitive, and some people do not like having those kinds of conversations. But in the long run, like that is, you can say it in a way that's like, I need you to go harder, not you stink and you're not going hard enough. Like those are, you're communicating the same thing, but it's a very different style of communicating that information. So if you can say, I need you to go harder, come with me, that's different than, and it's so much more powerful for an athlete to do that than for a coach to be like, you need to go harder. I think.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know, does that answer your question more, Becky? You had another question about what ways have you learned to motivate and command your peers while at West Point, Elise?
Oh, before RSR?
Yeah, before and now, maybe what would you do if you could go back?
Oh man, I would. So a lot of people, they don't really like know me as like confrontational, but I definitely think that like if I'm now a firm believer, like I'd rather like try and fail and rather than like be too scared to not like try at all. And so I think that I would have been a little bit more, I think confrontational is a bad word, but a little bit more challenging with my peers, especially like my teammates on the team, because I think I was so afraid like to speak up because I was always like, oh, well, maybe I'm just too young like to say something or to be a leader on the team or, maybe they just like don't want to listen to me. And like,
Well, and as a woman too.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah. Especially when I took up was it being Commodore of the crew team at West at West Point. That was also another fear, like being a woman, like telling like men what to do. But I think I would have, if I had more confidence, I definitely would have just like talked to my peers like more straightforward.
hold them more accountable, maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
So now, what are the skills you would use? So now you recognize this, and hopefully you see like it is sort of your job, right? And you might be saving someone's life in your work, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
if you're, so how would you do that now, do you think?
So I also rationalized, like I built this bridge, like training for 4 years and then like doing like 4 months of extra training to be like in the position and like the command that I'm in today. It's like building that bridge and like learning to take it, which is something that you also teach, and something that like really resonated with me as well at RSR. And I just, rather than like being afraid like I'm gonna say the wrong things, like I need to practice and like say the wrong things in order to like get the right things right. Because when like it's time for me to like do the right things in like its most dire like time, like it's more than important. So like if I'm still like training, like I need to practice so when the real thing happens, I'm prepared. So
Yeah, I have Becky, I have a real close former teammate of mine. I think I told you about her, Elise, at camp. She was a Harvard teammate of mine who was also in ROTC for the Marine Corps. So and they didn't count our rowing workouts for her thing. So she'd or they counted some of them, but not all of them. So, and that she had to like take the T to MIT to go do that 3 or 4 times a week. It was a total nightmare, in my opinion. She thought it was great. I thought it sounded like horrible, but I asked her when she came and spoke at RSR, she's somewhere else now in another country. She's been doing it ever since, pretty much, and we're 01, so she's been doing it for a really long time. I asked her about one of her biggest mistakes, and she said she was, and I'm totally going to not get this exactly right, but the gist is she was on like a practice like mission or something with her, it's a platoon, right? They call it platoon, right? And she was the person that was supposed to be in charge based on age and rank or whatever. And she said, you know, it almost reminded me actually of the G.I. Jane movie, like where she actually is in charge of that group. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, I have.
I'm sure it's like horrible, and most military people are like, this movie is so bad, but I'm like, I irked that all the time. Especially when she's doing one-arm push-ups. I'm like, yes, now I'm feeling really good every time. My friend said she got really confused and basically, I don't remember the word she used, but she deferred her leadership role to someone else and said, like, you take over and you make the decisions. And she said she got in a lot of trouble for that, like big time trouble. And I was like, interesting. And she said, in the military, that's like, you are in charge. You are never giving away. You can never get rid of that responsibility for fear of failure. Like that is what your job is. And I was like, well, what if you like really weren't the most informed? She was like, well, then you can seek advice or consult with other people, but like you're responsible and you can't punt the responsibility to someone else. And I was like, oh, that is legit right there. So she did not forget that, you know, but she said in the moment she was like super stressful. She didn't know what to do. And maybe she really wasn't the most experienced with that particular terrain or whatever it was. And she was like, I should have asked. And I think she was with all these guys, right, who probably didn't want to do what she said. So anyway, it was just really interesting. And my personal, though not military, when I was working in an investment firm, male-dominated environment, finance, I had some things where I spoke up because I thought something was not being done right. And I got pulled into the CEO's office who said, walk quietly, Holly, you carry a big stick. And I was like, what does that mean? What? I left and like called all my personal board of director people being like, what does that mean? And they were like, I think it means shut up until, you know, you've been there long enough, or just shut up in general. And I was like, And then I called like one of my even high school coaches who had been a mentor for me a long time. And he was so mad. He was like, this is one of the best qualities about you. And I can't believe someone would tell you to like stuff it down into your pinky toe. So anyway, that really helped me, you know, you think about this like conflict. And I do think it has to do with the fact that I was a woman in a male dominated industry that was maybe making a man not look so as he wanted to look at that moment. So anyway, I've gotten off the military thing, but I get very excited about this topic. You guys have any other questions? It's been so fun. You can come off mute and ask them too if you want. No? Nada? Well, Alyse, I want to thank you. First, I want to thank you for all of us, I think I can say, for your service and your commitment. And we are so appreciative of you and all of your peers. And tell these guys a little bit about where you're going, when you're going, so we can all keep you in our prayers and thoughts.
Oh yeah, so once I'm done, it should be about a month. I'm going to be deploying to Romania from, I believe it should be May to August. So I'll be back soon, but yeah, it's to deter